Hello everyone, welcome to my updated Zhongli guide. This is a guide I've been wanting to make for a long time, as Zhongli is easily one of my favorite characters, if not my favorite character. He's a character widely known for his great strengths and versatility, and in this guide I will go over why he's so strong and how to maximize his strength through his various builds as a burst up DPS, a shielder, and a main physical DPS, while highlighting some great new options for these builds and going over important things such as his kit, weapons, artifacts, constellations, teams, and tips. So let's begin. Zhongli has a fairly simple but honestly broken kit. It's a kit that greatly supports his teammates, allowing them to deal huge damage while also allowing for Zhongli to deal huge damage himself. His kit begins with his normal attacks, which is a sequence of 6 low scaling but cool looking attacks. Zhongli's charge attack will cause him to lunge forward and a long animation to cancel this animation while still dealing damage. Just as Zhongli begins his animation, you can jump or sprint cancel the animation and continue your rotation. Depending on how you build him, the importance of his normal attacks will vary, but for those building him as a physical DPS, I've tested his normal attacks to find out what his best normal attack rotation is, and it's 5 normal attacks mixed with a charge attack that's animation cancelled right away. This pattern deals the most damage while also consuming the most stamina, so I'd recommend to perform this when you have enough stamina, and when you run out, perform his attacks normally. Moving to his skill, this is where the magic begins. His skill when held applies his shield and summons a pillar. This shield is very strong, lasting for 20 seconds. The shield strength scales off of a high percentage of Zhongli's max HP and has 150% damage absorption against all damage. And upon taking damage, the shield will actually strengthen by 5% for 5 hits, totaling to a 25% shield strength increase. On top of all these great multipliers, when characters are protected by the shield, enemies will have their elemental and physical resistances reduced by 20%. This is what makes Zhongli a must pull. This shield is very beefy, near unbreakable with a decent amount of HP, and this shield can be reapplied with 100% uptime. Moreover, this shield grants a buff greater than noblesse or tenacity to your entire party. For the other part of his skill, his pillar, it lasts for 30 seconds and deals tick damage every 2 seconds while also giving energy. It has a special stone steel ability where when Zhongli's pillar is near other geo constructs, it will cause the constructs to deal the same tick damage, making this an easy way to get extra damage in teams where there is multiple geo characters. Zhongli's burst is another amazing skill. Not only does it look really cool, it's also very useful in terms of combat. It's a very high scaling burst with a low cooldown and low energy cost. Enemies hit by the burst will be in a status called petrified, where for a few seconds they cannot move. At crown level, enemies are petrified for 4 seconds. This burst is amazing as it deals high damage and is easily spammable. Moreover, each time an enemy is hit, they're pretty much frozen, so you can attack them and deal lots of damage uninterrupted. On top of Zhongli's already great capabilities, Zhongli has a talent that further increases his damage, this being the talent Dominance of Earth. This was the talent given to Zhongli when he was buffed, and it certainly does its job. All of Zhongli's damage sources are increased by a portion of his HP, making HP the next best stat aside from attack. As for which talent you should prioritize, for sub DPS Zhongli, prioritize first his burst, as that will be his main source of damage, and then his skill. You can ignore his normal attacks. For shield bot Zhongli, only prioritize his skill. If you want to invest more into Zhongli, you can then prioritize his burst, but since his build will only be focused on his shield, his damage will be low, so his burst will probably be a damage loss. Also, Zhongli's petrification is also kind of useless since his shield will already be so strong, so you're gonna be attacking uninterrupted anyways, so it may be best to just ignore his burst altogether. Lastly, for physical DPS Zhongli, first prioritize his normal attacks, then his skill, and then his burst. You want to level up his skill a good amount so Zhongli's shield won't break and he can utilize the physical resistance shred of enemies while being protected when normal attacking. You could ignore his burst, but if you level it up well, it can still deal good damage with good artifacts and buffs from other characters. Moving on to Zhongli's weapons, he has many great options both paid and free to play. For sub DPS Zhongli, his definitive best weapon is the Staff of Homa. This weapon is honestly a broken weapon. It grants high attack through its base attack and passive. It also grants HP percent, and to top it all off, it gives a huge 66.2% crit damage. This weapon gives Zhongli everything he wants and huge amounts of it, making it an insane weapon to run on him. Next is the Primordial Jadewing Spear. It maxes out on style points while also being a great option for him. This weapon will increase the damage of Zhongli quite a bit with its good 22.1% crit rate, allowing you to crit more and allowing for Zhongli to have more crit damage. Moreover, the spear grants high attack thanks to its high base attack and its passive. The hits mentioned in the passive are not just normal attack hits, the tick damage done by his skill are also counted, so Zhongli can utilize his passive effectively as a sub DPS. Another broken option is the Engulfing Lightning. This weapon is broken as it gives very high attack while also giving very high energy recharge. The high energy will boost your burst damage if you use 4-piece emblem, and even if you don't, this weapon will still increase your overall damage as Zhongli will be able to spam his burst. After this is the Calamity Queller. This is another great option for Zhongli since it grants a very high attack and an elemental damage bonus. I recommend to give Zhongli an HP sense if you're using this weapon, since this weapon gives so much attack, Zhongli can have more HP and benefit from having a strong burst with a strong shield. If you don't have these weapons, there's still many great options for him. If you lack crit, you can give Zhongli the Deathmatch, the Black Left Pole, and the Catch. If you lack attack percentage, you can give Zhongli the Vortex Vanquisher. This weapon is seen as a terrible weapon, which in truth, for 5 stars there are better options for Zhongli, but it is still a good option nonetheless. It grants very high attack while having a passive like the Jade Spear, so it's very easy to trigger. You can also give him the Wavebreaker's Fin. It gives high attack while directly increasing his burst damage based on his team's burst cost. Or the Lithic Spear. This weapon is a great weapon since it gives crit rate and attack percentage. The only downside is the passive only works with Liyue characters. If you lack energy recharge, which is very important on him, I'd highly recommend to give Zhongli either the Skyward Spine or the Catch. These weapons are close in damage and are better in certain builds, so I'd recommend to test them if you have them both. If you don't, use whichever you have. If you have neither of these, you can choose from either the Favonius Lance or the craftable prototype Star Glitter. For the Shield Bot build, the best weapon to give Zhongli is the Black Tassel. It grants a huge 46.9% HP percent and is an easy weapon to get through wishing. After this is the Staff of Homa. Honestly, I'd recommend to give this weapon to a character actually meant to deal damage, but if you have many of them lying around and you want to have Zhongli deal more damage, you can definitely give him this polearm. The last option is the Favonius Lance. This weapon doesn't increase HP, but the Shield Bot build does buff other characters, and if your team lacks CR, the best person to solve this would be Zhongli, given he has a decent crit rate. Now for physical Zhongli, the best weapon is the craftable Crescent Pike. This weapon has a good base attack and a good physical damage bonus, but what makes this weapon amazing is its passive. It's very easy to trigger and greatly increases normal attacks. This weapon gets even crazier with refinement, so if you can afford it and you want to have Zhongli deal crazy damage, I'd recommend to refine it. If you can't use the Crescent Pike, the next best option is the Dragon Spear. Though it has a very high physical damage substat, it has a low attack and a worse passive than the Pike. I'd only recommend to use this weapon until you can use the Crescent Pike. If you can't use these two weapons, you can then turn to the great options I already mentioned for Zhongli. So the Staff of Homa, the Primordial Jade Spear, the Vortex Vanquisher. This weapon is actually a pretty good option for physical Zhongli since the shield strength buff in its passive only occurs when Zhongli is active on the field, so you'll be able to normal attack with a strong shield, all while having a lot of attack. After this you can use the Deathmatch, and then lastly you can use the Black Left Pole. Now let's get into Zhongli's artifacts. For a sub DPS build, the artifact set that will net the most burst damage is 4-piece Emblem of Severed Fate. The set will give Zhongli 20% energy recharge, which will help him in spamming his burst and which will increase his burst damage through the 4-piece bonus. This set will greatly buff Zhongli's burst but neglect his skill and tick damage. So for a more mixed option that will buff his burst and skill damage, you can either use 2 Noblesse into Archaic Petra, 2 Noblesse into Gladiator, or 2 Gladiator into Archaic Petra. These artifact sets are very close in damage, so I'd recommend to use whichever combination you have the best substats on. Lastly, you can use any of the 2-piece combinations I mentioned and replace one of the sets with 2-piece Tenacity for a good 20% increase in HP. This combination is another good mixed option, but Zhongli will lose out on some damage, so if you'd like to mitigate some of this, you should try to have attack percentage in your substats. For the shield build, his best artifact set is 4-piece Tenacity. This set will increase Zhongli's health by 20%, increase his shield strength by 30%, and increase the rest of the party's attack by 20% when his skill hits an opponent. A close second is the Noblesse Oblige set. This set only grants the attack percentage buff, and the buff only occurs when Zhongli uses his burst. This set works for a shield build, but since his burst will likely be a loss in damage, it'd be better to activate the buff through Zhongli's skill with Tenacity than his burst with Noblesse. For physical Zhongli artifacts, I've tested all of the physical sets and the sets will be mentioned from strongest to weakest. The best set is 4-piece Pale Flame. With this set, Zhongli gains 18% attack and 50% physical damage bonus as long as his skill hits an enemy twice, which is very easy to do. After this comes 4-piece Shimenawa. When Zhongli uses his skill, he loses 15 energy but gains a huge 50% normal attack damage increase. This set is strong but is pretty constrained. You'll lose your energy so you can't cast your burst at will, and if Zhongli does not have 15 or more energy, he does not receive the buff. So though this is a strong option, you will have to work around the requirements and probably change your playstyle. Then comes 2 Pale Flame and 2 Bloodstained Chivalry. Though this set deals less damage than 4 Pale Flame or 4 Shimenawas, you constantly have the artifact buffs and are not constrained to playing in a certain way. Then comes 4-piece Gladiator, 4-piece Echoes of Offering. This set is a bit of an odd case. In truth, this set is good, but it is based on your RNG and oddly enough your ping. So if your ping is high or you get unlucky with its RNG, you'll lose a lot of damage. But if the 4-piece procs reliably, it's actually a very good set. So in truth, this set remains as both a good and a bad option. So I've ranked this set in the middle. Next is 4-piece Retracing Bolide. This set will increase Zhongli's shield when he's out in the field and increases normal and charge attacks by 40%. The last set is 2 Bloodstained and 2 Gladiator. As for main stats for the sub DPS build, you can run either an attack percentage sands or an HP percentage sands, have a geo damage goblet and either crits for the circlet. For the shield build, use HP percentage for the sands, goblet and circlet. Lastly, for the physical build, use an attack percentage sands, a physical goblet and either crits for the circlet. Now for which substats to aim for, if your Zhongli is a sub DPS, aim for both crits, attack percentage, HP percentage, and then energy recharge. For Zhongli to have a strong shield, while as a sub DPS, aim for Zhongli to have at least 23,000 HP. If your Zhongli is in a shield build, aim for HP percentage, flat HP, and then attack. As for the physical build, aim for the same substats from the sub DPS build. For energy recharge, if Zhongli is the only Geo character, aim to have around 130 to 150 energy recharge. If you have another or multiple Geo characters in your team, aim to have 115 energy to 125. Lastly, I'd recommend to level Zhongli to level 90. This of course isn't necessary, but if you want him to have the strongest shield or output the most damage, leveling him to level 90 will increase his HP and attack. Now that you know how to build Zhongli, let's get into his constellations. Truthfully, Zhongli's constellations aren't great. They provide minimum buffs or little quality of life changes that are really not worth pulling for. But if you have some money to burn and you really like Zhongli, aim for his C1 where Zhongli will be able to cast 2 pillars, then his C2 which will grant a shield to all characters when his burst is cast. This also works in co-op, so it is very useful in co-op. Then lastly his C4 where Zhongli's burst will cover 20% more ground and the duration of enemy's petrification is increased by 2 seconds. Once again though, I'd highly advise to not go for his constellations. Zhongli is already a complete character at C0 and these constellations barely add to his already amazing capabilities. With that covered, let's talk about his team comps. As stated in the beginning, Zhongli is a very versatile character that really fits every team, so whatever team you're using now, you can place him in and he'll shine. But if you want to know more teams that he shines in, the first team I recommend is pairing Zhongli with the Geo Traveler and filling the other 2 spots with characters that can perform reactions, for example Yelan and Diluc. This team is a simple but strong team that will utilize the Geo Resonance and Zhongli's strong shield. With the Traveler, he will battery Zhongli and multiply Zhongli's tick damage through his burst and skill, and the Traveler will also grant 10% crit rate to the active character with his burst. In this team, Zhongli can either be a sub DPS or shielder. The next team is Mono Geo. This team is great as everyone regains their bursts quickly since all the particles produced are Geo. Moreover, Geo characters sync well with each other so everyone supports each other and the team just flows overall very well. In this team, Zhongli can once again be a shielder or sub DPS. The last team is a Superconduct team for physical Zhongli. In this team, Rosaria and Fischl will trigger Superconduct for Zhongli. Yunjin will enable the Geo Resonance while doubling Zhongli's normal attacks. This team is very strong and super effective. And that is everything. I hope you enjoyed and gained from my guide on Zhongli. I'm glad to finally be able to make a guide on him. Zhongli is easily one of my top favorite characters. He's such an amazing character, he makes bad teams good, he protects his teammates so well, and he's just really fun to play. Overall, he's just a perfect character. Anyways, if you have questions you'd like to ask me, feel free to ask. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing. It means a lot and it helps out greatly. Thank you all for watching, and take care.